Good
Good
morning,
morning.
Tony.
Yes, good morning. How are you doing?
I'm very well, and how are you?
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, I'm enjoying the sunny weather. We're going to get well, the El Nino is now recognized internationally as being a thing, and we have some hot weather starting today, really. Started yesterday. It was very humid and it's looking nice outside, so I'm looking forward to being a bit outdoors today and for the rest of the weekend.
I shall do the same, yes, and it beats the rain, the damp, miserable weather we've had recently. Um, shall we get on with our topic for the day, which is teaching and tutoring, a comparison, classroom teaching, I should say, and tutoring with your experience of both, well, both of our experience of both. Are we ready to get on with that?
I think we should crack on with that. We should give a very brief overview of who we are. I'll talk about me first. I have a teaching background. I was in China teaching for 4 years, both English and then in classrooms of large uh, populations of students, 50 and above. Then I was in an international school for 2 years teaching biology to smaller classes, more like 10 and sometimes even as low as four students in the international baccalaureate system. Then I did a PGCE back in Plymouth, and then I taught in a school where we were back up to about 30 students per class. And since then, since 2006, 2007, there's been some supply teaching, but I've been mostly tutoring full time since 2015, which is much smaller groups or one-to-one engagement with students, and that's for science and maths subjects, GCSE and A level mostly. So over to you.
Yes, I've probably had more emphasis on the classroom teaching through my career and uh, taught at four different, no, to be accurate, three different private schools, international schools in Asia, in together with you in Guangdong, and then in Shanghai, and then in Vietnam, in Ho Chi Minh City. Then I came back to UK and been teaching at a private school in UK. So it's always been private. I've never had the classes
Yeah.
up to 50 that you experience in the Chinese state system, but I suppose I've
Yes.
had classes of up to 20. I have taught
Yes.
privately in a range of different, or as a tutor in a range of different settings, and from ranging from, I suppose, small sort of private tutoring setups in Taiwan, where I had like 10 to 15 students in a class, down to single students online, much as you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
So most of my background outside of our experience in that international school, which was a privately run, Chinese run international school with the IB system. It's mostly been state schools for me, for the PGC, the teaching as a science teacher full time, and then in supply teaching, it's all been state schools.
yeah,
So there is a difference there with our teaching experience, I suppose, in terms of who's in front of us. Um,
certainly. Mine have all been
and
private.
yeah,
Yeah, from memory, as far as I can remember. I
yeah.
don't think I've taught any
So
state.
we should probably do like you asking the questions mostly, but then maybe you can reflect on your own experience when I give some input into my perspectives on whatever you're asking. So fire away.
Yes, certainly. Right. The first thing is to get your take on what the biggest differences are, because obviously, as you just expressed, you've got experience of both. How does what are the big differences for you?
So teaching students in a classroom setting versus my own home environment, the main difference is the size of classes and the need to sort of have a different dynamic and different structure to what you're delivering and how you interact with the people in front of you. So in a classroom, you've got up to 30 students for GCSE, and you're trying to be everything to everyone, I suppose, while structuring your lesson to deliver some content and get some learning outcomes achieved across the whole of the class that you're teaching. And if it's a mixed ability class, that can be challenging in and of itself because you've got so many different abilities in the class that you're catering to. So you can't really do a one size fits all and please everyone. Uh, with perfection every time. Um, you're always going to be struggling with some students, perhaps from a behavioral management point of view as well, who may be disrupting what you're trying to do in the class. You may have some unhelpful behaviors. You may have some students who you can see glazing over, who are distracted and not paying attention at various points in the lesson. And you may have them glazing over either because they don't get it, they're bored, or because they'd rather be somewhere else doing something else. Whereas then you might have some students who are like, "Oh, this is too easy," and that might be why they're distracted, is because what you're doing is far too below their current ability level. So, whereas when you're tutoring one to one in particular, or even one to two, you have much more of a personalized engagement with the person in front of you. You can pick up on their body language. There's much more interaction. There's much more to and fro, um, and you can really dive deep into a topic that you can see they're interested in, which you can't really do in a classroom situation because of the diversity of abilities and interest levels, etc., that I've just talked about. So I think that's the two main differences: is size of group. What you're delivering is very standardized in a school, and you have to sort of deliver that content to that number of different ability students, and the personalized nature of delivery, which is much more easy to do when it's a one-to-one. How about you? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, firstly, it sounds very much like you're preferring what your current choice as a tutor. In terms of the in terms of the issues that you've just laid out and the approaches, but um, I I've seen something pretty similar, really, and I find that it is extremely difficult to keep a group of students focused, and the one size fits all
Yes.
is a, a kind of concept which we're meant to take on board in education in general, and I think that's rarely the case. That there is rarely that while when you're entertaining people with a certain mindset or way of thinking, then the others will lose track. So the class setting can be a challenge, and keeping everybody on board. I tend to do it by trying to entertain them myself to some extent by acting a bit strangely, I suppose. And I find that that can keep them on board. But then if I'm being a clown, which is part of what I do half the time, then obviously some of the more serious ones will, the ones who want the
Not take
more
you as seriously, perhaps.
yeah, yeah. So it really is a balance, and it's a difficult balance to achieve. It's a fun thing to do, so you do get that challenge. There's two sides to it. Tutoring, though, clearly is a one can read an individual student's response to whatever one is saying and make continuous adjustments, which mean it's far more likely to connect with them and the message get through. So there is a bit of fun in the group, large group, which you miss out with
Yeah, there's the social dynamics between
yeah,
members of the class that you don't get as a tutor. It's just
yeah.
between you and the individual. On most occasions, it is mostly one-to-one that I do. I suppose another big difference is when I'm actually delivering the tutoring versus teaching. And most tutoring for me has been after school, 3:45 onwards until as late as 9:30 at night, depending on how I load my evenings and balance work with life, family life. Um, so to begin with, I was loading up my evenings and working hard, working probably 30 hours a week, but it's all after school and then maybe Saturday mornings and Sunday evenings. So I was
Yeah.
loading my days up to begin with, and now I've got much more of a work-life balance situation where I won't load up my evenings until as late. And I've been trying to push the tutoring into the daytimes, which maybe we can come back to. But I guess that to begin with, it's a very common thing that students will come to tutors in the evenings after school, whereas the teaching happens during the daytime.
Yes, that must be challenging for you when you moved into tutoring to find that suddenly your family times were taken over, or family leisure, entertainment, whatever. I guess
Yes,
it's sort of reversed, isn't it? You're being called
yes,
upon when your family are free or your friends are free.
exactly.
So
Yes,
must
which
be
is something
difficult.
I'm actively trying to change. I'm trying to pivot towards more daytime tuition now, with the realization that most people work 9 till 5 in the real world. Um, so trying to make that happen from a tutoring angle involves searching out students in different time zones. So to the east, in particular, Middle East and Far East. And also looking for home ed students, and we have quite a lot of those in Stroud actually. Um, or students who are, they could be home ed students because of a preference for independent learning outside of the mainstream educational system, or they could be home ed because they have various issues that have caused them to drop out of the mainstream education system, which could be down to special educational needs. Um, uh, and I'm also doing a bit of tutoring with some students who are still at school, but have found a slot in their timetable to come to me in the school day. So that's another angle that I'm hoping to develop a bit more of. But I guess I prefer tutoring GCSE and A level aged students across the range of sciences and maths for GCSE, but maths and biology for A level. So I've got quite a range of subjects I can play with there. Um, and Yeah, like I say, I am looking to do more daytime tutoring to get the work-life balance sorted. And I
Yeah.
think you're mostly in the evenings, aren't you? But you do a bit of daytime as well for tutoring.
Yes, well, I'm in the fortunate position of being part-time at the school, so I have Fridays when I have time for other ventures, including tutoring, as and when there is the demand. But yeah, also I do have a bit of evenings of my evenings taken up and weekends, so I do see that the timing is certainly an issue. One thing I'd like to sort of dig into a little bit, Tony, is you mentioned there's a growth in the sort of home schooling and therefore room for something of a growing market for those students to in tutoring. Um, do you tend to use a similar style for these? If they don't fit in the school sort of normal school system, then do you find you have to vary your approach much? Obviously you can, but do you tend to approach each student in much the same way, or do you have to vary it quite a lot?
Um, I I think it comes down to getting them on a structured path. If they are going to do home ed long term, they need to have a roadmap for completing a course. So, for example, IGCSE, biology, chemistry, physics. If I can get them onto a particular platform which has all of the resources that they need, shout out to easyeducation.co.uk, for example, or Cognito Edu has good revision tools, I would say, for all of those GCSE curricula. If you can get them onto those platforms and then deliver a session aimed at moving them forwards on that roadmap, and then get them to engage in the habit of doing little and often in their own time, and you see that they're doing that, then they're on the path to, completing that long-term goal of doing all of the course. What I don't do is tutor like a school would, a set hour, set number of hours of like 6 hours per week or 2 weeks for maths, or for science. And I've got too many students to be doing that. And the most I really teach is 2 hours a week for most students. So I guess my answer is that for my home ed students, they have to be to some extent self-directed because they're not paying me to deliver 6 hours a week of education, which you would really need. You'd need more than that if you're doing biology, chemistry, and physics. So
Yeah.
there was one recent student. I was just delivering 1 hour a week in each of biology, chemistry, and physics to her, and she would have to then use the resource, which there are more and more of available online compared to 20 years ago. This was kind of like textbooks driven. Now there's a lot more interactive content online that students can use. And with the help of AI, they can self-direct their learning, and there is more personalization in the feedback that they get from those online tools as well. So that's kind of doing the job of a tutor in some ways, and I'm trying to then pick up the pieces of what didn't hit the mark and what they didn't understand, and looking at the feedback from those online platforms, red, amber, green. For example,
Mm.
look at the red and help them through those weaker areas. So I don't know whether that explains a little bit about how it looks from a home ed point of view, from what I'm delivering anyway, from that
It
angle.
it does. How flexible are these online platforms in terms of varying their approach and their message for different educational needs or different learning styles? Are they fairly flexible, or they tend to bang out the same old?
Yeah, some of them are pretty old school still, so it'll be a video, which you can pause, which you can rewind, which you can go back to. I have this Tony style way of doing things where I say actually use the video resource, pause, do, check. So for Maths Genie, for example, I'd say use the video. Um, on one side of the screen, it's got an example question. On the other side of the screen, it's a try this question. That's the style on Maths Genie throughout the GCSE maths, for example. I'll get them to even I'll model it in the lesson. I'll say, well, we've got an example question. Do you know how to do this already? I might give them some nudges. I'll have paused the video and then we'll both do it. I'll be doing it on my screen. I've paused the share, so I'll be doing it on my screen with them just seeing the example question. We can even like share a a screen where we can both write on it on a whiteboard on Zoom, for example,
Yeah.
if we want to. Um, so then we'll go through that question, and if they succeeded pretty well, then we'll just move on past the try this onto the next slide or next screen, as I'd call it. If they do that in their own time, I'd say that's quite an interactive way of using the video tool, because they're trying to do it, they're engaging with the content, they're then checking by playing the video and then using a different color pen. So that's one way of interactively using something that you might not think is very interactive. It's an active engagement with a resource in that way. And there are like extra questions on the website where you go, okay, there's some more under the video, some more like places where you've got a question and then you tick answer. So, oh yeah, I did get that. Answer. Oh, I did get that. So drilling the skills in that
Yeah.
way. Different platforms are, more personalized depending on which one you're talking about. I think there is an element of um, taking being self-reflective that you're teaching in the sessions, and you're teaching the students to check their learning for themselves and to sort of um, get that skill of being a reflective learner. And that's a lot of the coaching that I'm doing alongside the teaching is getting them to be reflective um, and take control of their own learning journey. I think that's really important, that critical thinking, that reflective sort of approach. And also the mindset thing we were talking about previously of like, it doesn't matter if you make mistakes, it's a good thing. You're growing, you're learning from your mistakes. It's a growth mindset. I'm pushing that at all times. And I think of myself more as a coach, when I'm doing that, I think, than a teacher.
Yeah, that's a good point because as a teacher, I think as a class teacher, I feel that the students are expecting everything to be formalized and standardized and following rigorously adhering to a schedule, whereas I think the flexibility of tutoring should enable you, as you say, the responsibility to put the responsibility for the learning on the student, which is something that a class structure tends to minimize. And or if I tell students they are as I do, that they're responsible for their learning, and only one person can really achieve the outcome that they desire, and that is them, there is still an expectation that
Mm,
I can do it for them. Um,
yeah,
but how do you get through? I mean, there must be parents or students who are thinking that if they're paying for private tutoring, for separate tutoring outside the regular system, then
yeah,
they will expect, that there's they're buying a higher grade ultimately. How do you deal with
yes.
that?
Yeah, so there's a couple of scenarios here as to what my role is. So, am I delivering a full course or directing a student to like use a platform and um, I help once a week in each subject and they manage their own journey to a large extent with my feedback and help and support to the end. So I had one very motivated girl who was able to complete all of biology, chemistry, and physics in 6 months to then sit the exam for all three IGCSE,
Right?
which is attainable with the right approach for a
Yeah.
student who's very self-directed and motivated, but it won't work for most students. Then you've got the more common scenario of my daughter, my son is struggling with subject X. Can you help? Um, and then they're expecting me to boost their grade via my 1 hour a week with their son or daughter. And I suppose you have to manage the expectations of just because your son or daughter is coming to see me doesn't mean that magically I sprinkle dust on them and they then they perform well. There has to be the right dynamic. There has to be the right things that they're doing in between sessions with me that shows that they're enabling their further learning on this journey to then open up the door of a higher grade. I suppose that's one way of thinking about it. Because if they're just coming to me and just using that 1 hour and not doing anything else outside of sessions, then it's going to be far less effective than if they use the hour with me, do a bit more in between, as well as their school stuff. You're going to have a uh, much more scope for improvement in that setting. So managing the expectations of the parents is important. Sort of pointing out that, oh, I didn't get an email from your son or your daughter in between sessions. Does that mean they didn't do anything, or does that mean that they did do something but weren't able to respond because they haven't got the habit of, you know, like sending emails? How can we make that work better? Can I, you know, nudge them via a WhatsApp group that you're also in? So you're trying to find ways to get the students to work between sessions and give you feedback. Um, if you've got an online platform that the students are on, you can see their work as well. You can see what they've done. Especially if I have access to that online platform as well, I can see, oh, they've completed the homework that I've set them on top of the 1 hour of engagement that we had, face to face. So how you can track the extra work is important. I use a scanning app on my phone. I've got a smartphone. I've got an iPhone with a scanning app on it. So I scan stuff, notes that we've taken, and send them as a PDF to students. I do a lot of that extra sort of stuff to try and influence the students to do the same and give me some feedback on work that they've done. So I can then use that in the next session. It's a building block that I can then go from, in the next session. Do you have a similar sort of idea about managing expectations?
Well, one. does have to one does have to make sure that they are not of the opinion that they don't believe that just showing up once a week to a Zoom meeting will get them the grade. And I I find that when I'm tutoring, it's not something that I automatically am concerned or aware of, because as a classroom teacher, I feel like it's my whole responsibility to do to make sure that they're all on track and following the direction that I want, and maintaining decent progress. Whereas as a tutor, I've largely seen it as being uh, they should be coming to me with issues. They've got to be doing the work. Um, and I've been fortunate in the majority of students, probably over half of the students that I have tutored have come to me being aware of that and have driven it largely themselves. If they don't, I don't think they've really had as good an outcome as their parents would have desired. So, as ever, I mean, I think that's a sort of common thread on any type of teaching, that really, if they take responsibility, if they're aware of, if the student is aware of it and takes responsibility, they will do well, whether it's in a classroom setting or in a tutor setting.
Yeah,
And I have some in the tutoring sort of setup who just who who will not take that on board. And as long as they've got that
yeah.
attitude, I don't think they're going to progress in education any which way you throw it at them, really.
Yeah. I mean, the first step is always building rapport with the student, isn't it? Like making
Yeah,
sure that the dynamic between the two of you is helpful for both of you, is win-win. Um, if you've got a lot of obstruction, a lot of sort of negative behaviors, then that's a red flag that you need to address. Otherwise, maybe it's not worth continuing.
yeah,
I've had a few situations like that where I've managed to flip the dynamic in a positive direction so that actually I'm not a judging, nasty person like you might make me out to be. I'm not the projected monster that you have me as. I'm here to help you. That's my job. And if you treat me like the nasty monster, then I might become the nasty monster because it's a self-fulfilling prophecy that you've made happen, you know. But that's not what my role is here.
is
So
that their
and
natural assumption? Is that where they're coming to you? Do you think that's what the education system can do to people, make them think that education's
Yeah, I mean, it
confrontation?
or it might be that they've had negative experiences with teachers, so they have a rebellion against
Yeah,
someone telling them what to do. Sometimes it's like this is all irrelevant. Why does it matter? Sort of attitude. So you have to
yeah,
sort of help them understand not just the reality of getting grades and job markets later on, but this is actually helpful because, and then give them a concrete example of something you can do with this knowledge that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise, and try and get them to understand, in their own worlds how it could help them, and that's a skill in itself because.
yes,
Sometimes you're doing trigonometry and they're never going to use this again, and it's very challenging to find a real world example of of where they'll do this. But if you can link it to some sort of labor, or like how much fencing do you need, or how much, what's the angle between um, this and that, and how would you measure that and cut it with woodwork or something, and if you can relate it to a real world example, carpentry or painting a fence and how much paint you need, or what perimeter of fence you need to put around the garden, um, what holes you need to cut out of your lawn
yeah,
to put a pond in, how much grass seed you need, and all that sort of stuff. Just relate it to real life in some
yeah.
way. They can then see the connections a lot better. So that's what I would do with maths, wherever possible, just to make it real and do some applied questions are often the hardest ones because they rely on you having some basic skills in place and putting them back to back.
Yeah. I
You
used to
show
say,
you show that as the end goal of why we're doing this.
Yeah, I would use the same in a classroom. I try to make the economics that I teach real world, and it's got to be applied. Yeah, there's the issue of when they're going to use this in future life is always a difficult one. But I imagine it's easier to tailor it, or from my experience, it is easier to tailor it with on a sort of one-on-one tutoring situation because you know what the student's interested in, you know the way they
Yes.
think, and you
Yeah.
can pick examples that are of value or of relevance or within their sort of range of experience. So,
Yeah. Just yesterday we were doing sets. For example, I've got a very ADHD student in year 10 who is hopefully going to get a grade 4, but is also, you know, on that boundary between grade 3 and grade 4 for maths, doing foundation maths. And the sets notation is a bit alien, let's just say. Like the dash means not. So probability, P bracket A with a dash means probability of not A.
yeah,
Um, you've got like a Venn diagram with A in a circle, B in a circle, some overlap between the two. You've got this funny squiggle, which is an epsilon Greek letter, which means universal set. And then you've got some numbers outside A and B. So how do you relate this to a real world example? Like A and B could be apples and bananas, or it could be Arsenal and Barcelona, because I know he likes football. Do you like Arsenal? Do you like Barcelona? Do you like both? Oh, you're in there. Do you don't like either of them? Then you're outside both. It's just how you play with the
yeah,
A and the B and what you do with it um, is dependent upon the interests of the student in front of you and how they're going to engage with the ideas. And he likes football, so that's what we did. And you repeat it with C and D, and you try and find football teams that start with those letters, or anything that you know about that student, you relate it to that cats and dogs. So yeah, you can do that a lot more easily when you know the student better than you can with a class of students who might have divergent interests.
yeah. Yeah, okay. You did earlier, at some stage, you mentioned about students who maybe you mentioned ADHD. I think would it be? Do you think you're getting more neurodivergent students in a tutoring setting? People who are not accessing like normal educational like progress, through the standard channels.
Yeah, I think um, you have to also realize that on my profile, I do cater for neurodivergence. It's like I do have experience with students living in my own home who
Yeah.
are, age 16 to 25 back in the day, 2008 to 2013. I worked at a local college called Ruskin Mill, and I have a psychology background as well, but we did a residential social worker type of role where the students lived with us for a number of years and we helped them develop their independent living skills. And that looked like cooking and catching a bus safely and doing the laundry and changing their beds and their bedding and doing the washing up and loading the dishwasher, whatever life skills, you get the picture. Um, so it's an interest of mine to help people, whatever their level of engagement with the real world might be, and that looks like different things for different students. So with the autistic kid that I saw this morning, I notice his attention wandering all the time. I notice his sort of distractibility all the time. I have to give space for him to re-engage. In a classroom, you've got a dedicated LSA, learning support assistant, who's there to refocus the student in a class with a teacher at the front, where they may be doing some group activities and they may be doing some, it might not just be didactic chalk and talk at the front. There may be some group activities as well. But for me, I'm there, I'm just looking at what he's doing and I'm looking for engagement and I'm trying to pick up on whether it's hit or not, hit or miss. Have I worked, and I'm being a bit silly sometimes to get his attention back. I'm using different accents. I'm being different people, just to try and re-engage him, which you can't really do in front of a class of 30 kids who are not neurodivergent. So you can
Well, you
ham it
can
up.
try. You
You
can
can
try.
be
You take the
neurodivergent
initiative on it.
yourself, is what I'm saying, to some
Yeah.
extent, to be on their wavelength. and be play get them where they're at.
Yeah,
It's much
I
more
suppose
hard
you,
to do that in a
yeah,
classroom.
you can't sort of mimic 30 different students' behavior and mix it up and present
Yeah,
something that is gonna
yeah.
that will get through. So
I do think, though, to answer your question, is there more neurodivergence? I do think there is
yeah.
an increase in ADHD and in autism diagnoses and general extra sort of time, um, being sought out by students and their families, their middle class families in particular, seeking 25% extra time. If you look at the graph of like if your if your exams office, is there a trend upwards for extra time in exams? Then, oh yes, there is very much so. And what's the cause of that? Is it maybe something to do with social media and the screen interface? Everyone's got a phone, everyone's on social media, everyone's distracted more and more by TikTok and YouTube and Instagram and Snapchat and blah blah blah. Then probably I'd say that's what's causing there's a cause and effect relationship there that's playing into that observed increase in neurodiversity, I would say.
Yes, we've seen it too in a more formal school setting. The increase in extra time or students being given extra time, attention, problems with the level of attention. It makes me wonder, Tony, do you get better results? Do you think, or are you confident in getting better results with such students than they would be able to get in a formal sort of classroom setting? Do you see it? Have you had any
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
pleasing
Yes.
improvements on that?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure if you count dyslexia as neurodiversity. It probably is, isn't it? I had a
Sure, it
student who was
relates.
really struggling at Red Knox School many years ago. Uh, and she was doing combined science, and she was on for twos, like two, or maybe 2 3, in science. I worked with her back at the old house when I didn't have the dedicated cabin. I was in the kitchen, doing the tutoring. Um, and she was really motivated. It's just she didn't have the resources, I suppose, the access to resources. She just needed to be shown the way for her to then do the work effectively. So she ended up with 2 8s at the end of our, interaction, our weekly sessions, a year later. Um, so she went from 2 2 to 8 8, which opened up so many doors for her. Um, and I think in some cases, it's just a case of being shown the way, being shown that you can do something. And if you can see the student's got the right approach and does want to succeed, then they are off and running. And all you need to do is structure it for them a little bit more so they can see the path that they are very motivated to move along. So there are other examples as well of students who, without the right sort of um, coaching, I suppose, and understanding of their neurodiversity, you're giving them confidence that they can succeed despite their neurodiversity. I suppose they're more accepting that they're different in some ways because everyone's different. Everyone has a different approach. If you take it to an extreme, you're different from me. We have different ways of engaging with the world, with learning. We know what works for us, and it's about finding what works. Which can be a lot of trial and error as well. It's not a one size fits all for every person. But there are general ways of general sort of tools that can work, habits you can establish, growth mindset, things you can put in place, um, lack of distractions you can put in your environment, think ways that you can change your environment to make it more likely that you're going to do the right things to enable your further progress, etc. And you just sort of make it more clear to the student that in their particular case, these things are obviously working. So do more of the same, and maybe we can tweak other things to make it even more helpful for you going forwards. The confidence builds, their ability builds, they do better at school, and it's a self-reinforcing loop that you're putting in place.
Yeah. Are you filling gaps in the system then? And if you are, because that's how it sounds like it's needed for people to for students to be able to access education, to have someone who's listening and who is tailor tailor making their program to some extent. Uh, it sounds to me like that. Is that the case? And also, do you feel that this need is growing, with the social media? So would that mean that basically schools have to move towards a more sort of tutoring based system, or that's the future?
I think so. I think 19 years ago, when Ken Robinson delivered his TED talk about our Victorian education system, where we have an industrial model of education with teacher at the front and groups of children being educated, talk and chalk style,
Yeah.
is outdated, outmoded in many ways. And we have better ways of delivering education now. Than we did in the Victorian era, but we're still sort of very stuck in that model of learning, with the authority figure at the front and the students following the authority figure in large groups. So I think there is something to be said for alternative ways for people to learn. Um, and yeah, I do think that we are moving more and more towards an individualized learning approach. But that's not to say that the classes of students approach is always ineffective. It's just to say that there are other ways of doing things that do result in what we might call success. So I do think we will see an increase in tutoring in the future. The figures show that we're up to like 30 to 40% of all students already receive tutoring outside the classroom, from a baseline of more like 10, 15% 10 years ago. From what I've seen on LinkedIn, the sort of content that other tutors are putting out there that I read shows these sorts of ideas that the tutoring sector is only increasing in size. So what that looks like in the future, maybe you have some opinions about whether we are moving away from a traditional schooling system with classes of students. I don't know. What do you think?
I think we need to. Of course, what we've touched on, but haven't really gone into is the role of AI in this. And you mentioned about how you tailor your approach or adjust your approach to incorporate these online platforms. And I
Yeah,
think that is the way. Um, and it really boils down at the end of the day to the flexibility of the sort of standard educational system in the country. That
hmm,
obviously, as a tutor, you can offer flexibility, and you'll work with those AI platforms and the
yeah,
videos and whatever, and you'll make sure you'll set up for for the student as to their needs. I think it's
yeah,
going to be more difficult in a class setting, and as class teachers, we are certainly using uh, these platforms and the technology, but certainly for an essay writing subject, it's more difficult to have AI teaching people how to write. I think for other more scientific, sort of harder, clearer answers, it's probably easier where it's more clearly right or wrong. Whereas it's more of a value judgment that I'm involved with, or it's opinion based, like whether this
yeah,
writing is good, is it convincing or not, then
yeah,
it's far more difficult to bring that in. But I think ultimately, the future of education depends on which system is more able to harness and work with the new developments in technology. And I
Mm.
find it hard to get away from the idea that tutoring or individualized education is going to grow because of the fact that it will suit individuals, and the class is
Yeah,
always difficult
yeah,
to standardize it.
I do think that we're losing something, though, if we completely pivot away from um, the traditional schooling system, which is there being an ethos that everyone is signed up for to follow within a particular school. There's an identity, there's an ethos, and there's also you can't really quantify the importance of interpersonal engagement, um,
Yeah,
face to face with other people. Um, we're losing something if we just say, well, we're not going to do that anymore, and we're just going to all go on our screens and learn with the help of AI or a tutor online or something. We are losing something that's really important. Um, we have to still work with people at the end of the day. We don't want to be plugged into the matrix. We want to be people. We want to be humans. I don't think we want to be transhumans. I think we want to be um, maybe using AI on the side as a tool, but we're pushing towards being more cyborg as time goes on, aren't we? With all of our, I always think of my phone as like a tricorder from Star Trek. It's like the universal translator. It can do everything except beam me up Scotty at the moment. Like from you can even take pictures of things and work out what they are because of the access to the internet. You can say, oh, what's this plant, what's this animal, what's this um, how do I do this thing that I'm trying to do on my computer, and you just take a photo and it tells you what to do next. So it's still a tool um, that helps you actually navigate the world more effectively. When it turns into something else, then we're what is its role beyond being a tool for humans? That's what I struggle with, um, because we still have to be um, humans on an interpersonal level, engaging with other humans. I think otherwise we are losing something really essential about what it is to be human. Would you agree with that sort of where does this lead idea?
yeah, yeah. It's a balance, like so much else in our lives. The need for interaction, and it's something I increasingly do, I think, as a classroom teacher, is to try to get the students to work with each other rather than me being at the front telling them the truth. And when we were playing a game, we played top trumps about different
Yeah,
levels of
yeah,
inequality. They made their own top trumps cards and they
yeah,
played the game, and they
yeah,
were very keen. It was I I some of them were keen because they wanted to compete at this game that they'd made. Some of them were keen because they wanted to, well, I hope, maybe my own rose-tinted view of it. I believe some of them wanted to actually understand why countries had different degrees of inequality and the cause and effect involved. So, but overall, the idea that I'm getting through on this was that the interaction was of value, and that game was a method for harnessing that. And it would be far more difficult in a tutoring session. So I think
yeah. I think
ultimately,
I think
um,
you know to do practicals, you do need a laboratory. You do need to be handling materials and doing it in that setting. You know, otherwise you're just modeling it through screens all the time. Um, and yeah, maybe in the future, I was just having this thought that if there could be some online tutor-led classroom work, then it comes down to making sure the students are engaging um, with um, with what's set out by this, you know, the online tutor that could be on a screen. Maybe we have a flipped sort of role of the teacher, which is to ensure that the students uh, are doing the work, understanding something that's already been recorded. It's like a flipped approach. It's
yeah.
like it's already there. So some of them may have already engaged with the content, and the role then is to go around and facilitate learning on an individual level. It's more like you are a tutor going around helping tables of students um, who are, trying to work out um, some some problem or understand some concept. And I always liked it when the focus is less off you didactically instructing students and the group approach where you're going around helping groups of students who are engaged in learning and teaching each other, mentoring each other to some extent. So I mean, you're not just going to be standing at the front. There's a whole spectrum of what teaching looks like, from the lecturing in a hall in a university to teaching classes of students to one-to-one tuition, isn't there? And I think you can actually have all of these things if you play it right.
I think that that is the way forward, really, to have a combination of these. And the school system has to move towards what we're doing, or as tutors, or bring on board more of that individualization that tutoring allows, but also maintain the opportunity, continue to provide an opportunity for the interaction and sort of peer-led mutual learning. So yeah, the ideal system has got to, well, again, as we mentioned before, it's you've got two different systems, and you want the synthesis of the two, which hopefully will give us something better. And we're
And the
standing here.
personalization thing that you were asking about with AI, we're not quite there yet, I don't think, with AI um, personalizing the learning perfectly. We're nowhere near it being perfect at individualizing the learning. There's still a lot of scope for misunderstanding or just not getting something. So if I look at something like Sparks Maths, which is a very common platform for schools to have set up, they'll have homeworks, um, and the questions have to. There's this idea of differentiation, isn't there? Of like the
Yeah.
difficulty of the work has to match the student's current level. So how well is the work that's set matching the student's current level? Are they going to engage with that homework? Will they find it helpful? If it's not matched perfectly to their current level and moving them on, scaffolding their learning, then they probably won't engage with it and won't want to do it. I've seen that time and again um, with some homeworks that are set on these platforms. Um,
Mm.
so that's where you have to make sure that the material that they're given is, you know, clearly moving them on from where they're at. That's not always done that effectively, and the platform doesn't pick up on that. It just shows that they haven't
Yeah.
done the work, and it's not teaching them the skill other than here's a video which is similar to that, and the student has to make the active effort to press on that video and watch that video. To then apply that knowledge. And there's some steps there that, as a tutor, you can sort of go, well, you can point them more clearly, you can scaffold it more for them. They have to have a certain ability level to scaffold for themselves, or else they just won't do it. They'll just go and watch something on their phones instead.
Yeah, yeah. It's well, again, we're coming down to it's got to be tailor-made, and that is an important skill, I suppose, how to direct this as a tutor and how you're managing their education, your role, which is as important as the content. Uh, Tony, I can see that we're coming towards the end of our time on this one. Just wondering. Like, are there any things that you found particularly challenging or stressful about tutoring that you'd like to say would be one question I'm interested in asking, and another one would be what do you hear about maybe some advice you could give me as a class teacher? What do you hear from your tutees about class teachers? What are the commonly directed criticisms, or how much do they enjoy their class teaching, and what do class teachers typically get wrong? So, either of those questions I'd be interested in hearing your view on.
So first up, what did I find difficult? when I
Yeah,
first
any
came into
stresses
tutoring.
or challenges, right? Like for you, what
Um,
regular issues you get as a tutor?
so as a tutor, you have to have certain ground rules in place around, I suppose, um, the number one logistically would have been last minute cancellations and being clear that if if you cancel on the day, then you still need to pay the money because I can't operate as a business with you just canceling like with hours to spare. So you have to make sure that the parents understand your role as a tutor is also a money-making enterprise that you can't function properly in unless you have certain ground rules. I give 48 hours as the time frame within which I can't guarantee replacing the student with another student to then still earn the same money. I can try, but I can't guarantee. So if you're cancelling within 48 hours of the lesson, you may still be liable to pay. You probably will still be liable to pay the full price of my tuition. So I guess the logistic side of things, I had to make sure I was clear about and enforce properly. Otherwise, you have the wrong dynamic and the you have last minute cancellations and not turning up. And
Yeah.
if they're getting away with that, they'll keep doing it.
Mm.
Also, knowing when to quit with a student, I struggled with that. I was, I think, too lenient to begin with, and not picking up on this. This isn't working for either of us. Let's stop. Uh, I would
Yeah.
lean towards the parents making that decision before I did. And I think that actually you have to make a decision sometimes that this isn't going to work sooner as the tutor and make that call as the tutor
You had to
rather than
get rid of
relying
a
on the
few then.
parent to understand that, it's not working to make the call on your behalf. You have to sort of take ownership of that
Have
as a
you done
tutor.
that? Have you done that a few times then? Had to tell them this
I
is.
have, but I was slow to do that to begin with as a tutor.
Yeah.
Um, And sometimes I've been surprised by the turnaround with my forthrightness and how it's actually flipped the relationship with the student. So maybe all it really would take is a nudge that this isn't working, and unless X, Y, Z happen, we're going to stop. That's actually flipped the dynamic and made it work better. So being honest is important about, you know,
Yeah.
this isn't sustainable unless, and then put a few things in place. And
Yeah.
then reassess after a couple of weeks as to whether it's going to stop or not. I think
I'm,
those are the
I'm,
main
sh-
two.
I'm sure
Yeah.
that would get the parents on side as well if they're paying for it, and then you're being straight up about how this is
Yeah.
working or whether it's not
Yes.
working or not. That's
Yeah.
I can imagine that's motivational. Um,
And from the point of view of from my students, what do they complain about?
yeah.
You know, I think they complain about when one of their teachers goes off on sick leave and then they have a new teacher who's not owning really the scheme of work, doesn't isn't really clear about what the scheme of work is, maybe has some gaps in their subject knowledge, isn't someone they can ask questions to. That's where I see things going wrong, especially with maths, but also with science. It's where there's maternity leave or sick leave and someone new comes in and takes over and isn't really doing a good job. And that's where my role is more important. So that's
Right.
not really helping you because you're there the whole time, but it's just an observation that I have where the
Yeah.
main struggles are in the state school system in which I cater for mostly.
Well,
That's the
it's
reality.
it's still it's still of relevance because obviously disruption to a student's educational process is very important, and if they are having cover teachers, then that will clearly not help them. But also, do they do they typically are they typically happy with the education that they're getting at school, or are they fairly critical of the way that like their normal teachers are presenting things? Or have you
I think
any?
that's quite an open question. It varies depending on their relationship with their teacher and their relationship with the subject that they're being asked to learn. So it really depends.
So you get
There are so many variables that play into that
okay.
equation.
Make it easier. Have you had any say, going on about why about teachers that they really cannot get on with, and that they just think the system
Yeah, I mean,
down.
they can feel like certain teachers um have it in for them. Like they're always doing wrong by this teacher, and they're of the mindset that nothing that they do will please this teacher, and they're always frowned upon, and they're always doing bad things. And that's really not a nice dynamic to hear. Like no matter what they do, they're still not being praised. They're still not getting any positive feedback from that teacher. It's always perceived to be negative feedback. Then maybe the teacher needs to be made aware that this is, the perspective that the student has in that situation, and that's something that the parents, if you tell the parents, then you're hoping that the parents don't go in and scream and shout in that situation,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
that's not going to improve the situation either. So you're treading slightly on eggshells in that situation. So I suppose the best approach that I have is, I don't think the teacher means that. I'm not sure the teacher's aware that that's your perception of what's happening. Obviously, I'd put it in different language because I'm talking to a child in most cases. So I'm dumbing down the language and getting
yeah.
on their level. I can empathize. I can see from your perspective how that might look. But have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? How about you don't worry about that so much and just get on with the journey that you're on, and show the teacher that you're learning by actions rather than emotions, that just do more of this and watch your grade go up and then see what happens. That's maybe a more of a constructive approach. I'm aware that time's up and we've done nearly an hour today. So listeners may be extra happy that we've spent so much time talking about this particular topic. But I'm off for a period of
Yeah.
time now, and I won't be doing any more uh, talks with you potentially unless we find some slots whilst I'm away in Asia, for a period of time. But we'll re-engage in August, I think, with some
Yeah.
follow-up sessions.
Yeah, we'll see if we can find a, mutually convenient time whilst you're in Asia. But otherwise, yeah, I suppose we'll have to see how it goes. But maybe we can get your maybe some reflections from you of your holiday, or
Yeah, it
of
will be via my phone. I'm not taking my laptop, so
yeah.
if we can do some um, content whilst I'm out in Asia, it will be rough and ready via my phone, if anything. I can access Zoom, and I probably can upload those raw videos um, from Bali and from China. But we'll see what happens, and check in and uh, do something hopefully before August.
Yeah. Well,
Good to
have
see
a
you as
good
always.
holiday.
Yeah,
Um,
thank you very much. We're off on
uh,
Tuesday, so
yeah,
let's
yeah.
see what
I'm
happens.
jealous. I'm jealous. Yeah. Have a good trip anyway, Tony.
Take care, William.
See ya.
Bye bye.
Bye, mate.